If you didn't get one of these at the door, feel free to pick one up on your way out. They're also available on our website and on the county website. And I want to thank Pine Grove School District for making their facility available to us here this evening. Before I get into my introductions, I'll just point out we've got a couple of our county commissioners here this evening. Thank you guys for coming. And members of the assessment office, I'll pick on them later, or not. My name is Tim Barr. I'm with Vision Government Solutions Incorporated. I've been doing reassessments, working for originally my grandfather for 40 years. Some of you may have heard that company names change. Well, that's because my grandfather's company was 21st Century Appraisals. And then when my dad retired, we had Evaluator Services and Technology. And then that company was acquired by Vision, who's been around for a long time. So it's not so much that the companies have changed, it's that Tim Barr's history has evolved over time, that I've worked for 3 reassessment companies. During that 40-year period, I've done a lot of meetings on clean and green, property reassessment, dealing with the technology and the data to try to make property taxes more fair in the Commonwealth of PA. Let me set some boundaries on the topics I'm going to cover tonight. If you're thinking about tax fairness, you oftentimes think about it in terms of our pocketbook, right? How much we pay. The reality is tax fairness could be broken into 3 pieces: A, B, and C of tax fairness. A is assessments, and I'm going to talk a lot about that tonight because that's the purpose of tonight's meeting. Assessments under the Pennsylvania Constitution are to be uniform, like people paying the same tax. If there's 2 properties, 2 farms side by side, and they don't pay the same tax and the physical description's the same, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Assessments are to be uniform. B is also part of tax fairness. That stands for basis, how we pay for local government. How many of you think just generally real estate taxes are too high, or any taxes are too high? You don't need to raise your hands. Too much is of the burden of paying for local government is on the property owner. That may have worked 50, 100 years ago, but how much you own isn't related so much to your ability to pay anymore. The only way the basis can change is Harrisburg. That's a legislative change. And whether they shift it to sales or income, reduce it in varying degrees, I can't do anything about that. Your assessors can't do anything about that. Your commissioners can't change the law. They can go to Harrisburg to lobby the legislature, which they've been doing, by the way, to try to encourage the basis to be changed. But there's nothing to debate tonight about basis. So when we get to the point of Q&A, if you ask me questions about funding government, that's not assessments. That's not what the reassessment has anything to do with. In fact, the reassessment's revenue neutral. I'm going to explain more about that as we go on. I said there's A, B, and C of cost of tax fairness. C stands for cost control. I personally believe that government should not spend $1 more than it has to provide the services its citizens demand. Let me say that again. There's a lot of words there. Government shouldn't spend more than it has to provide the services its citizens demand. Reassessment doesn't change how much money the government takes in. It just changes who pays what portions and what allocations. So if you have concerns about cost, go to a school board meeting, go to a municipal meeting, go to the county commissioners meeting. Help them understand what's important to spend money on and what's not. That's not part of a reassessment. So I set the stage with my ABCs because B and C aren't the topic for tonight. Personally, I would love to see the basis shifted, less burden on real estate. I would love to see government spend less, or at least spend it wisely. Those aren't the topics for tonight. So that's the end of the Tim Barr bully pulpit on tax reform. If you want to talk to me more about that after, in the parking lot, I'm happy to share my thoughts. So If assessments are to be uniform, how do we fix it? Well, the county needed a reassessment. These are the topics we're going to do tonight. Why reassessment? Did I turn it off? No. Why do we need a reassessment? How do we get here? The steps. And this is probably the most important thing. What comes next? Because I want to help you guys go through the process. In order to keep taxes fair or uniform, the basis or the reason that we're required to do that isn't just because we all think it's a good idea. It's because the Pennsylvania Constitution says that all taxes are to be uniform on similar properties. If you and I have similar properties in the same township, we're supposed to pay the same tax. It's written in the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, there's no teeth to enforce that other than the courts. So you'll see court-ordered reassessments, you'll see court-stipulated reassessments. In fact, I'll get to that in a second. There are laws that define how assessments are done, how reassessments are done. If you want to research it, I don't know, do we have any research hounds, people that really like to dig into the detail? Google Consolidated County Assessment Law or Google Title 53, and you can read all the primary rules that govern how this reassessment works and how assessment in general works. The assessment office has to maintain a roll, an inventory. And they've done a great job of that. But this is the first time in 30 years that anyone has visited every single property. You got a building permit, put up a new building, they're going to come visit you. What happens to your taxes when that happens? They go up because they just assessed you. When you do a whole county, it's a different set of rules. They have to maintain the rolls, parcel numbers, tax maps. They have to value and assess and maintain a permanent record system. They're not required by law to put it on the web, but they do. All of that creates a database, but it's still a 30-year-old database as amended by all the changes over time. So the reassessment was triggered by a lawsuit. 2018, there were some property owners got together and said, these taxes aren't fair. My neighbor's paying less than I am on the same house, and so forth. And they hired attorneys and they hired a consultant to study the values. So the county hired their attorneys and consultants to study the values because they wanted to fight. Reassessments are expensive, millions of dollars. Most of the money goes back into hiring local people to do the work, but it's still really expensive. When you haven't had one in 30 years, it's like that root canal. Go to the dentist every once in a while, you don't need a root canal. The lawsuit was being challenged. County hires a consultant. Guess what the consultant said? Your values are really bad. You're going to lose. So rather than spend more money fighting the challenge, when they knew their values weren't really fair, that like properties were not paying the same, that they were in violation of the Constitution, your commissioners consented to starting a reassessment. They put out RFPs. We were one of 3 bidders. If you look at the cost over the long term, we were not only the most qualified, but the least expensive. So yes, it's expensive. No secrets there. Everybody knows this is millions of dollars. But that's what ultimately was the straw that broke the camel's back and triggered a reeval in this county. It's frankly what happens in most counties. Those of us in the business would love to see state standardization. Anybody know anyone that lives in Maryland? They reassess every 3 years in Maryland. It's just automatic. You think the values change much after 3 years? No. You think they change much after 30 years? Unfortunately, yes. The last reassessment was in 1996. I was here for that. I worked on the computer technology side of that reassessment. There was another vendor that did the values, but myself and some of the property owners I've met, some of your commissioners have been here doing this since the last time. The values go, would you all agree that real estate values go up over time? Yes. Do you think it's the same everywhere? No, it's not. But how much is the average increase? Well, the state publishes a number. It's called the common level ratio. Sometimes it's called the common level ratio factor, that says that values today, the assessed values today, are about 5 times what they were 30 years ago. Now, 30 years ago, assessed values were 50% of what properties were worth. So if you do the simple math, what we're really saying is the market has gone up 2.5 to 3 times. But the assessments are going to go up about 5 to 6 times. Why is that? Because people are paying more for real estate. If we bring all the values to today's level and send out notices to everyone saying that your $50,000 property is now worth $250,000, I'd have to send an ambulance behind the mail truck. You're going to hear more about revenue neutral. That's not what happens. When you bring the values up, the millage rate has to go down. That's a preview. The real estate market changes over time, but does it change the same? Now, this is just illustrative. It's not specific areas. Do homes in Pine Grove go up exactly the same over 30 years as the ones in Pottsville or Blue Mountain or Tamaqua? What about the brand new housing developments that have gone in with the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, and $600,000 homes? Do you think they have the same inflation factor as the houses that are row homes along the streets downtown? Those homes have gone up too, but do you think it's always the same? It's not. Property types are different. Mobile homes don't go up in value the way houses do. The mobile home in a mobile home park, they depreciate at some point, right? So how does the assessment office value all of your homes? That example I gave, you got a brand new housing development. It's less than 5 years old. How did the assessment office value it? They had to use 30-year-old pricing. What would it have been worth if those houses had existed 30 years ago? The assessment office must, by law, use base year rate schedules in Pennsylvania. And you can't reset your rates without a reassessment. And you can't fix just an area. That's called spot assessing. You're not allowed to do that. So we've got all this change. Schuylkill County has another thing that's caused lack of uniformity. And if we have any school district officials here, I understand why school districts do this. Schools can appeal. So here we have 2 properties in Orwigsburg. They're almost identical properties. One of them is assessed for $16,000. The one on the other end of the block is assessed for $26,000. The only difference is this one sold. Otherwise, they're the same. But the school district saw the sale, appealed the assessment, used the common level ratio, which is a countywide average, by the way. It's not specific to any given area. And they got the taxes raised on the one that sold. Totally legal. Totally unnecessary when this reassessment is over, because those 2 houses will be assessed consistently. And the law says that sales price outside of an appeal, sales price shall be considered but not controlling. If you paid $200,000 for your house, I can't just set it at that. It's illegal in Pennsylvania to just set it for what you paid for it. Because I don't know if she got a really good deal or foolishly paid way more than she should have. Pennsylvania law prohibits me from just setting it at what an individual sale is. I have to look for the pattern. So let's say, for example, that the 3 of you over here own homes, and I realize you probably own the same house. But let's say that you have 3 different homes, and they're all identical. Would you agree that they're supposed to, and they're in the same township, would you agree they're supposed to pay the same tax? Nod your head yes, because if you don't agree to that, then I'm wasting my time. Like properties, pay the same. But you know what? You paid $200,000 for yours. You paid $180,000 for yours, and you paid $220,000 for yours. What's the value of those 3 homes? What's the proper assessed value of those 3 homes? Now, I just told you I can't set it at the sale price, so I've given the answer away, haven't I? Somebody call it out. What's the proper, what does the market indicate those homes are worth? $200,000. That's the pattern. You're going to think I overassessed you. I'm only 10% different than what you paid, so I didn't. I'm in the ballpark. But you're going to think I overassessed you, and you're going to think you got away with something because you paid 220, and I only assessed him for 200,000. The pattern of the market is what controls the goal. That's the target. And if I get the values close to what the pattern indicates, and when you look at your individual values, if it's close to what you think you would sell the house for or the property for, then the reassessment has been successful for you. If it's wildly different, if you're like, there's no way I'd get more than 80, they're out of their mind, they think I'm going to get $200,000 for this property, then you're going to go through the processes I'm going to talk about later on. We need to follow the pattern. So who sets the values during a reassessment? Does Tim Barr set the values? Does my staff of licensed Pennsylvania assessors, we have to be licensed in the state to do appraisal work. It's a special license for mass appraisal. Do they set the values? No. You guys did. When you bought and sold properties over the last 3 years, you decided what the going rates were for different types of properties in this county. We're just studying what you did. We could speculate on what the market's going to do later this year. We could speculate what the economy's going to do next year. None of that matters. We have to look at the history of what the pattern has been. Now, if she really did pay way too much for her house, she came in from New York, doesn't know what real estate's worth here, and thought she was getting a good deal. But sorry, you got taken advantage of or whatever. You paid what you paid. I hope you're happy with it. But if she paid too much for her property, if it's not typical for the neighborhood, we call that an invalid sale. It does not go into the soup. We do not consider it when we're studying the market. We trim it. We ignore it. And reversely, there might be someone who paid far less. And we might discover that it was a transfer between a father and his son. Obviously, that's not an arm's length transaction between a willing buyer and a willing seller on the market. It's between 2 family members. And depending upon the circumstances, the son might have paid extra or he might have gotten a deal. I don't know, but it's a family sale. It's invalid for study purposes. Nothing wrong with the sale. It's just not an indication of the pattern in the market. So these 2 properties, this is what it means in taxes. This is a real number. These are real properties in this county. When you apply the county municipal and millage and school millages to these 2 properties, one assessed at 16 and the other at 26, it's $700 a year paid by the wrong person. There's that much difference between these. So if we're going to fix that, we need to bring the values in line. Well, okay, Tim, you've showed us an example, 2 properties in Orwigsburg that $700 difference. That's the exception, not the rule, right? Well, remember I told you the state calculates how much the values have gone up over time? They also calculate the average error. It's called the coefficient of dispersion, fancy word. It just means average error. So let's pick 1, 2, I need 5. So I'm going to have to, I'll use over here again. So I got 5 people. You're in the front, thank you. It makes it easy for me to if I have 5 families that all have equal valued homes, we agree they should pay the same tax, just like the example I gave earlier. Let's assume that the amount of that tax is $2,000. County, municipal, school combined, $2,000. Now that's probably low, but for the sake of my illustration, I want to keep the numbers simple. Congratulations, your assessment is going to go up, your taxes are going to go down, and you're still going to pay $2,000. You're paying the correct amount for that property. With an average error over 40%, it means you're paying $2,800. 40% of $2,000 is $2,800. This is a statistic based on all the sales, thousands of sales, over 5,000 sales, over 5,000 validated sales in the last 3 years show us $2,800 taxes on him because it's 40% over. And guess what? Good news for you, at least historically, you're only paying $1,200. He doesn't know he's overpaying because it's all 1996, thank you. It's all 1996 monopoly money. But you're 40% under assessed, he's 40% over assessed. And if you remember the bell curve, we're in a high school auditorium. Remember the bell curve? If that's the average error, that means there's somebody over here paying over $3,000. And I'm picking on you the other way now. You're only paying $500. You have the same house they do. They're paying $2,000. You're paying $500. You're going to hate me because I got to bring her value up to today's level. You're going to be paying the same as them when this is over because he's been paying your taxes for you. And we aren't going to let that happen anymore. So we're going to bring these values up so that instead of seeing them all over the place, they're going to align that like properties pay the same. This is a very real thing. I was in Adams County at a meeting after the notices went out. We don't usually do that because it's hard to talk about big picture things once you've got your own piece of paper in the mail. But I had a lady come up to me and she showed me her notice and she says, I don't understand. This says my taxes are going down and yet my value is going up. How's that possible? So she was in his category. Overpaying, didn't know it, didn't appeal. I looked at her notice and I said, that's right. If this is what your property is worth, this is what your taxes should be. And she broke down because her kids have been helping her stay in the house, helping her pay the tax. She had no idea she was overassessed. She came to the meeting to protest and yell at me about how her taxes were going to go up. And lo and behold, she had in her hands the evidence. Now, nobody believes me until you get your bills. I get that. I own that. Until you get your bills, you will not believe me that a third of the property owners in this county are going to see a significant reduction in their tax bills. And a third are going to see a significant increase. I'm going to show you proof of that at the end. There's another problem. It's called regressivity. Fancy word, price-related differential. Right now in this county, those state statistics indicate that the expensive homes, the ones at the bottom, the big fancy houses, the big commercials, the things that are worth more money, are paying a smaller portion of the tax than the smaller, less valuable stuff. It's upside down to the way you might think that you would want it to be. More expensive properties pay less, less expensive properties pay more. The statistics bear that out. It probably doesn't surprise you. Over 30 years, those new developments go in. They can only use 30-year-old base year rates. There's no way to accurately value the really expensive stuff that didn't exist 30 years ago. And the reassessment is going to fix that. It's going to take the less expensive properties, the more expensive properties, and it's going to make them look like this. If my house is worth twice what yours is, I should pay twice what you do. Let me say that again. If my house is worth twice what hers is on the market, I'm supposed to pay twice what she is. If nicer house, fine, great. I live in a nice house in Dauphin County. I shouldn't pay any more than what my property is worth, but someone with a property that's worth less than mine should pay less. And I know there's examples, because I hear it in every county and every project, of people who could pick out their neighbors' properties and say, yeah, that's why we're reassessing. And when this is over, they're going to be realigned. The goal of a reassessment is to bring all the values up to 100% of January 1, 2025 numbers. What's it worth today based on what you folks have bought and sold properties for? I could put the values at 90% and you'd think that I was giving you a break, right? If I told you your $200,000 houses were only worth 180 in the first place, none of you'd appeal. None of you would appeal. Yours is 180, yours is 180, yours is... But I'd be cheating you and the county. I'd be cheating the county because they hired me to do this reassessment according to IAAO standards, international rules about how it's supposed to be done. And I'd be cheating you because I'd be denying you the ability to evaluate whether I really put a fair number on it or not. If I think it's worth $200,000 based on the data, I'm going to put $200,000 on it. And then I'm going to invite you to an informal review and a formal appeal if necessary. Uniformity of similar properties. So we've done all the data collection. That was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. Knocked on the doors, visited homes, did not go inside the homes, gathered that data, gathered the commercial data. What comes next? We're going to mail a preliminary value. It'll come from Vision. It'll come out next month. That tells you what we think the property is worth. And then that will start what's called informal reviews. Now, an informal review is a clerical process. In fact, we are not allowed by law to talk about value. Now, if you tell me that the space above your garage isn't finished, better yet, bring in a picture that shows that it's just storage up there. We thought it was finished because it had curtains in the window. The darn most expensive curtains you ever hung up because you made the assessor think it was a bedroom. It's not a bedroom. You bring it in, it's not finished living area. That will lower the value, but we don't talk about value at informal reviews. It's only about the data. Now, the informal reviews, actually, I don't want to get ahead of my slides. That comes first. Then, on or before July 1st, everybody's going to get an official change of assessment notice. The most important thing to know about that is it starts a 40-day clock. From the date it goes in the mail, you have 40 days to appeal your value. So if you think after the informals and everything else that our values are crazy and it's not going to sell for that, you're going to want to appeal. Oh, I'm sorry, let me go back. The appeals, phase 5, none of this changes taxes until next spring. The bills you just got for county and municipal, that time next year is when this, so this doesn't fix it for this year's county municipal, doesn't fix it for the school bills that are going to go out in the summer. It fixes it for the next cycle. I'll do Q&A. If you don't mind holding, I'll take all the questions at one time. Let me see how I'm doing on time, though. Okay, we're good. The people visited the property. You've all seen that. Where we study the sales, that's the most important use of value. Some other things that go into the valuation of the properties are neighborhoods. What's a neighborhood? Neighborhood, there's an old joke. The 3 most important things about the value of a property are what? Location, location, and location. If I take the house down here on the corner and pick it up and drop it at the ocean, in the Outer Banks, overlooking the ocean, that same house is worth a whole lot more money. Location drives value. In reassessment terms, we call that a neighborhood. I live in a development with 81 homes built by one builder. So Dauphin County drew a little boundary around that and studied that area by itself. The price of what people pay in my development does not affect the value of the people across the street from me who aren't in the development, because they don't have sidewalks, electric, they don't have a homeowners association either. So maybe that's a good thing. You got to identify neighborhoods. Are there places in this county, and I know there are, where it's not just 1 or 2 blighted houses, it's whole blocks? That's a neighborhood. I was working on Blair County over in Tyrone where my grandparents grew up. There was an area in Tyrone that was floodplain. If you were in the floodplain, it was like the price values dropped 30% on that side of the road versus being on the side of the road that was not in the floodplain. It's a neighborhood. So we break them into these groups, and we have over 1,000 neighborhoods in this county. There's only 67 municipalities, and we have over 1,000 different neighborhoods that we've identified. Cost value, what does it cost to build a house? And then you got to depreciate it. How much, it might cost $300,000 to build a house, but when you factor in depreciation over time, wear and tear, and all of those things, you end up with a lower number. Not so much of a secret, cost valuation is always calibrated or adjusted to match the sales, because the law says I'm supposed to predict the probable typical selling price of what his home's going to sell for. It doesn't matter what it costs to replace your house. I got to figure out what it's going to sell for. So cost is just a way to get reasonable numbers. So bigger houses have a higher price. If somebody has a big deck, that's going to add cost value. So we study at cost. Now, income approach, that's your commercial properties. Properties where we look at the rent from the real estate, not how many cheeseburgers they sell. It's more like I own the building and I rent it to you and you sell cheeseburgers out of it. How much rent do I get and what are my expenses? That's affected by things like, does the tenant pay all the utilities or do I? If you'll pay more rent if I'm paying the utilities, you'll pay less rent if you're paying all the utilities. That's the income approach. And I've done 3-hour seminars on that topic alone. Those are the 3 approaches that have to be considered. But I will tell you that the sales studies are the most important to me, and the income on the commercial property, and cost is just how we get there. So once we have all the data in, we calculate these values and we study things. And then we use the computer, and there's aerial imagery that was taken that flies to the whole county so we can see what the properties and the areas look like. County already had that. So next month I said we're going to mail these preliminary notices. You need to look at that notice and ask yourself, is this a reasonable price? If that's within 10% of what you think, if my number is within 10% of what you think you could sell it for, then you're in pretty good shape. If it's not, if it's really low and you wouldn't sell it for anything near that, I'm probably not going to hear from you. But if it's wrong, maybe there's something wrong with the data. Ever hear the phrase garbage in, garbage out? We did a lot of work to train our staff. We hired local folks to do the data collection. They were not the appraisers. They don't make judgments about whether a mobile home is actually livable or not. They're not allowed to make that decision. They're just going to measure it. When we tell them to measure every piece of hardscape, they're going to measure a 10 foot by 10 foot burn barrel pad because there's concrete there, and take a picture of it, which is what I want them to do. But sometimes, especially when this hasn't happened in 30 years, it's not going to be perfect. I'm the first to admit that. We mailed everyone, well, the residential properties all got a data verification mailer. And you can still send those back. Even after you get these, you can still send those back. And then we use the information. You know your property better than I will, or someone that I send out there. It is helpful to include photographs and additional information. We're doing something new, for me anyway. We've always put a toll-free number on there for people to call. What's new is we're doing telephone informal reviews as an option this time. It's not a Zoom meeting, it's a phone review. But if you want to talk about your data, remember I said we're not allowed to debate value at an informal review, but if you want to talk about your data, call the toll-free number when you get your notice and say, I'd like to talk about my data. And they will schedule you. If you're computer savvy, you can go on the internet and just do it yourself. You go to our website, the link will be turned on where you can schedule your own informal review. For the next, you'll see the available slots, pick your time. I encourage people to do the phone reviews because it's less time for you and us. You don't have to drive down to our informal review center, which by the way is going to be over on Industrial Boulevard, I think it's called, the old STS building, which is a county building that we're going to use for both informal reviews and formal appeals. If you want to sit down with somebody at a computer screen and go through the data in person, then you're going to ask for an in-person informal review. Your choice, you get to pick. Don't get to do both, but you get to pick. You want to do a phone review or do you want to do an in-person review? I'm ramped up for lots of both. I don't know which we'll have more of. It doesn't matter. Because at meetings like this and every other opportunity, I've always said, I want people to go through this process. If you don't think the data is right about your property, please tell us. Because guess what? I don't get any more money for leaving it right or wrong or having the value higher or lower, and neither does the county, the school, or the municipality. I said it's revenue neutral. I'm going to prove that later at the end. This reassessment does not produce any more money. If you come in for an informal review and we discover that the space above the garage isn't finished, we're going to lower the data, change the data. It's going to lower the value. Did that just cost the school district $1? No, because it's revenue neutral. There's no penalty to any. I gave you as an example earlier. You put a new deck on or an addition and your taxes go up. You go into appeal, usually your taxes go down. In a reassessment, it's all in flux until it's over. So we want it right. This is your opportunity. We're ramped up. We got a special office just for people to come in and sit and talk to somebody. Yes, if you come into the assessment office a year later and say, that space above my garage isn't finished, they're going to be like, you should have come in last year, but okay, we'll help you out. And they'll correct it if it's wrong. But we're ramped up for it now because Vision's here and we got all our staff. So phone review, or you can schedule it by phone or you can schedule it online. You can have an in-person or you can have a telephone. And by the way the telephone reviews work, you make an appointment and then we call you as close to that time slot as possible. I mentioned this earlier. We're going to put an estimated county tax impact on every notice. I don't want to send ambulances behind the mail truck. I want someone to see that even if their value goes up more than average, the taxes are only going up a smaller amount. It's not the final tax amounts, it's an estimate that I'm going to calculate. But it'll be reasonably close. So 800-525-9876. If you call that right now, you'll get our data verification team. Once the notices go in the mail, you'll get the call center that's scheduling people. If after July 1st you don't agree with the value, you have 40 days to file an appeal. The law doesn't allow an informal review to debate value because a debate about value has to happen in front of a 3-panel appeal board. And the county is bringing on recruiting a pool of auxiliary appeal board members. They don't have to be appraisers. They're just folks that have the ability to hear information and make an informed judgment. The formal appeals will occur in August, September, and October. And those get scheduled differently. You file your appeal form. There's a place on there that you can write, I'm on vacation with my family this week. Please don't schedule my hearing while I'm away. And then they won't. They'll work around that. But they will decide, they being the assessment office, they will set the schedule and tell you when to show up. And when you come to a formal appeal, now this is important, have an opinion of value. If you don't have an opinion of what your property is worth and some evidence to support that opinion, you've wasted your appeal time because they're not allowed to change it unless there's a reason. So you've got to come in and say, they valued me at 200. I only think it's worth 140. And here's a bunch of sales of similar properties that I've looked at. I've done my own analysis, or I had an appraiser do an appraisal for me. Present an opinion of value and evidence to support it, because the burden of proof is on you to show that the number that we put on it isn't right. Now that may seem harsh, but that's the way the law is designed. And part of the reason for that, and by the way, part of the reason for that is to keep the fairness. Those appeal board members can't come in and say, you know what, you're the nicest lady I've met this today. You were so polite. We're going to give you 20% off on your value just because you were so great to us today. Thanks for coming in. What did I just do? I just raised everybody else's taxes to compensate for the reduction I gave her. The boards aren't supposed to do that. So they're going to get taught what the rules are about being an appeal board. And if she comes in with good evidence of value and an opinion, she may prevail and they'll make an adjustment. But if she comes in and says, and this, I'm being harsh, but I want to be honest. If she comes in and just says, I can't afford to pay these taxes. It's worth what you said it's worth, but I can't afford to pay these taxes. They can give her a copy of the rent rebate form. They can make sure she signed up for homestead, farmstead. They can, if it's a clean and green property, then they can't lower the value just because of ability to pay. That goes back to my ABCs of taxes from the beginning. So we've got informal reviews first, so don't get too worried about formal appeals just yet. But when the time comes, file your appeal form if you don't think that value is right. The appeal boards will hear your evidence. They can raise it, lower it, or keep it the same. Wait, did you just say they could raise it? Yeah, technically, but that would be because they discovered something that demanded that. It's pretty rare, but we've had people come in, okay, my basement's completely finished, and but that really doesn't have, wait, we hope your basement is unfinished. It's finished? Well, yeah, it happens, but it's rare. I'm not trying to scare you away. I want you to go through the process. I just mentioned clean and green. Chat with one of the couples here at the beginning. My grandfather actually helped get the Pennsylvania Constitution amended to create clean and green. Now, the exciting thing in this county is most of the farmers and foresters are already enrolled in clean and green. But if you or someone you know has 10 acres or more of farmland or forest land and they're not signed up for clean and green, they should check it out. It allows the taxes to be based on the farm-related or forest-related value instead of the present-day market value. It doesn't do anything for building values. The buildings are worth what they're worth. Doesn't necessarily reduce the land value either, or I'm sorry, the base acre, the first acre, because that is where the house sits. But the additional land gets assessed at numbers that come from the state. Now, 30 years ago, the state didn't publish numbers, but all of those values are being replaced with state values. And guess what? They didn't go up quite as much as the market did. So overall, the clean and green properties are going to find some helpful stuff. Because the legislature knows that a reassessment triggers another wave of clean and green enrollment, they allow us, it's not really allowed, we're required to extend the deadline until the 15th of October. So you've got more time to sign up for clean and green in the year of a reassessment. I mentioned homestead, farmstead. If you live in the county as your primary residence and you have not filed a homestead, farmstead application, the deadline was March 1st, but you can apply for the next cycle. And you probably got these letters every year inviting you to sign up. The schools mail them out. The primary resident for the owner is entitled to a homestead. Now, right now, the only thing that does is reduces your school taxes by a certain amount, and not as much as we wish, right? The county is evaluating whether the county might be able to do a homestead exclusion too under Act 50. Can't promise that, but they're researching that to see about maybe providing a reduction. The thing about homestead is, it's whether school or anything else, it's not a discount as a percentage. It's a fixed amount of assessment. So if I take a $20,000 value off a particular property at the school district level, and the property was only worth $20,000 to begin with, they pay no taxes. The property was worth $40,000, they got their taxes cut in half. If it was worth $1 million, they got 5% off. It's a very progressive approach because it really helps people that are in less expensive properties. So again, anyone you know that owner occupies their home as a primary residence, look into the homestead, farmstead program. All right, finally, time to prove reassessment's revenue neutral. Those legal hounds, Title 53, Section 8823, requires that the county, the municipalities, and the school districts lower the millage so their money stays the same. I'm not going to read the legalese on it. But if, well, you know what? This is easier. There's a slide. This is just sample data. If the county was worth $734 million before the reassessment and had a 30 mil, everyone know what a mill is? You take a mill times your assessed value equals what you pay. When you take a mill times the sum of everybody's assessed value, it's the budget of the taxing body. And it works in reverse. The budget of the taxing body divided by the sum of everybody's assessment tells me what millage will produce the exact same $22 million. So I had a school business manager ask me the other day, what's my millage going to be? And I said, I don't know. It's too soon to tell, but you don't need to know. What? He didn't say it that way. It's just, you know what your budget is, right? Yes. That's all you need to know. We're going to take that budget, divide it by the new tax base, and that will tell you what millage rate breaks even. The law does allow counties and municipalities and schools to do a second vote to raise taxes in the year of a reassessment. Let me explain that. The first vote, public meeting vote, has to be to set a millage that in this example would go from 30 to 5, revenue neutral. 30 seconds later, they can come in and say, but we need more money for this, that, or whatever the reason. We're going to raise taxes 10%. That's the most. 10% of 5 mils would be 5.5 mils. They cannot go to 6 mils in this example. Not allowed. 10% cap on the county and the municipalities, which don't normally have a cap. School districts always have a cap. The cap doesn't go away during a reval. It's exactly the same. So we've got tax rates coming down, values going up. It's ultimately revenue neutral. The number one misunderstanding about this reassessment, and don't show your hands, and I didn't ask you at the beginning of the meeting, but if you're at the church or the diner or whatever, and you say, how many of you people think your taxes are going to go up as a result of the risk reassessment? They're almost all going to say, well, of course, isn't that why they're doing it? Well, you've listened to me for over an hour now explaining that isn't why we're doing it. It doesn't even produce any more money for the county. It costs them a lot of money to do it. And the schools and municipalities don't have to contribute to that, which is another tax reform topic. But the county has to make this right, foot the bill, and they don't get any money from it. What they get is fairness. They get 3 property owners with $200,000 properties paying the same. They get the 5 people in the example, $2,000, $2,000, $2,000, $2,000, $2,000, like properties paying the same. That's what is the result. If you don't think this is real, this is the proof that I mentioned earlier. I worked on the Blair County reassessment, and at the end, the commissioner said, Tim, can you show us what happened? At the end of the reassessment, after all the appeals were done, what happened to everybody's tax bills? So we studied it. All we had to do was take the old millages times their old value, the new millages times their new value. It was really easy. And this is the county, municipal, and school combined. All 3 taxes together. And for the purposes of the study, I defined $150 as the break point for significant. Have you taken your family to a steakhouse for less than $150 lately? Probably not. But 33% of the property owners in Blair County, their taxes didn't change more than $150. County, municipal, and school combined. Now, I feel bad for the folks on the far end. There were 1,600 people whose taxes went up over $1,200. But you know what? They needed to, because they were paying a fraction of what their property was worth. And you can't fix the one on the left without fixing the one on the right. There were almost 2,000 properties. Their taxes went down over $1,200 every year. And if you think that's an anomaly, because this was back in 2016, Tioga just did a reassessment. Theirs wasn't quite as old as Blair's. Tioga had 41% of their properties within 150 bucks. More properties went up than went down as a percentage, but the money was perfectly balanced because it's revenue neutral. No taxing body made any money on that. They had 629 where their taxes went up a lot, and 744 that got massive reductions of over $1,200. That's why we're doing this. This is a hard business to be in, I'll be honest with you. I'm unpopular. I've had my vehicles vandalized over the years. People will go to public meetings and make up false information about me that have no basis whatsoever. And why do I do that? Because back in the 80s, when my grandfather said, Tim, can you help me with the computer stuff on our reassessment work that we're doing? I was a computer nerd, and I'm like, yeah, sure, Pap, I'd love to help. I caught the bug of making stuff better than when I found it. And not just the folks in this room or the ones that come to the meetings or the folks that watch this online. I'm making the assessments more fair for 92,000 properties in this county. All those people are going to pay closer to what they should because of the effort that my team and I and the assessment office have gone through. Now, I don't say that to brag. I just want you to understand this is real. This affects people's lives. What you pay in property taxes for your property is a big part of your budget and how things live. And if it's not right, then we need to make it right. I'll start the questions. I might have gone a little over my break point, but I hopefully answered most of your questions. And at this point, who wants to be first? All right, we'll come over here. And so everybody can hear.
Pembroke Borough just had their floodplains adjusted in 2024 according to the Borough. Was that considered in the
Okay, good question. The floodplain lines have been recently changed. Was that considered in the reassessment? The changes to things like that, zoning, I can only consider them once they've had a chance to influence the market, because I have to look at what properties have sold for. So I'm not trying to evade the question. I don't know whether that made a difference or not, because I don't know whether buyers and sellers before the change changed their buying patterns or not. If they did not, then no, it's not factored in, because I can't think about speculative stuff into the future. But if this county follows the pattern of a couple of others and does cyclical regular reassessments every 40, are you really kidding me, Tim? You're going to do reassessments more often? Absolutely. That's what I mentioned, Maryland. If this county were to do updates more often, it's less than a tenth of the cost. The assessment office can do most of the work, and you can adjust for things like that. Floodplain changes, zoning changes, the market changes in one area versus another. If you go to the dentist a little more often, you're not going to need another root canal. So the honest answer is probably not, because it's too new. Can it be done in appeal? Again, you're going to have to present evidence with sales showing that the market is affected. You can't just come in and say it's in the floodplain. What I will say is, if there are properties in a floodplain in a neighborhood that didn't have it before, and it's a pattern, I'd want to know about it this year. And if there's a lot of it, going on, I may have some leeway, but I ultimately have to see some sales evidence to have something to hang my hat on.
You do comparison to other neighborhoods that have had that kind of change.
Can you do comparisons against other neighborhoods that have had that kind of change? Um, you can present anything you want, but ultimately it comes down to buyer what people have been paying for real estate. Next hand, back here. That's okay. I want everybody to hear, plus the folks at home.
I'm new to this school district, okay? We sold our home and moved here, and when we were looking at different homes and stuff, basically what I looked at was taxes. I wanted to know that I could afford living in my home until I die, I'm older. And how do I explain this? I know value comes with the cost, okay? But it's just that I don't understand what you're saying, that my house that we bought now and the taxes that they told me. Now, was my home, did I buy my home based on what the taxes are going to stay? Or is it because you think I should have paid more for my home than I did?
It's it's not because I think you didn't pay the right price. If you paid a fair price for your house, whatever it was on the market and all of that, then that helps set the market for the area. There's a couple things that I want to address. The first is Pine Grove Area School District has a budget. This budget doesn't change as a result of reassessment. So if someone moved to this school district because they like the amenities, they like the school, they like the tax base at large, that doesn't change from a reassessment. Whether or not you are currently, quote, overassessed or, quote, underassessed, I don't know until we put numbers to your property. But as I showed on the graph, you're either in the middle category or that you're going to go up or go down. There has to be people in all three categories. There's no desire or target to say, well, because you paid more, it's worth more. Let me explain that further. This is not California. Welcome, stranger. You come in.
The values of a lot of homes in this area and other areas are way overpriced. I mean, to us, they needed so much work, but yet they were $350,000 and stuff. So you're telling me a home is based on the outside look of a home, not on the inside. So I could own a home that was completely remodeled on the inside, but the outside is a disaster, and my taxes are going to be lower.
I don't know whether your taxes are lower or higher, but your value, if the inside, let me answer, if the inside of a home is not matched to the outside, our initial number will oftentimes be off. And we actually have codes in the computer for inside's nicer than the outside or vice versa. If you come in, maybe you put all new vinyl siding and new windows in, but that's it. It's the kitchen's 50 years old, the electrical system is just as old, insulation's insufficient. If we look at the outside, which is all we can do to start with, and the inside is not matched, that's a data change. We can fix that at an informal review. But we would want you to bring some photographs to show that. It's less common for people to do the reverse, although I have seen it. Last week, I looked at a property where the asphalt siding was falling off and the steps were falling down. And we just happened to be checking online and saw the interior pictures with the granite countertops and the kitchen that had been clearly put in the last 3 years. The thing did not look at all on the inside like it did on the outside. And we're like, what the heck? So what do? We marked it as inside better than the outside because we learned the information. Tell us things we don't know about the property and we can make that adjustment. But you touched on something else that I want to speak to the group about. I'm going to go back up front so you're not looking at my back. The real estate market over the last 3 years or so has done what? it's gone up. Somebody will say, if you haven't thought the question or posed it, they'll be like, isn't this the worst possible time to do a reassessment while the property values are high? Right? Anybody thinking that? Guess what? If we lock in, we have to do base year in Pennsylvania, right? If we lock in base year rates when the market is high, we also, because of the law, are locking in a lower millage rate because it's high. Higher values, lower millage rate. Now, of course, taxing bodies can raise millage. They could do that anyway. But just because the market is higher doesn't make the taxes higher, because revenue neutral, not an option. So those millage rates are going to be less because of what's going on in the market. That makes me feel a little bit better about it. The other problem that is harder to deal with is if the only homes selling are expensive ones, does it pull up the whole market? And the answer is it can, but not always. If the ones that are selling are nicer, newer than the ones that are less, then our condition scores and our grade and some of our other measurements are hopefully going to account for the difference. And it's called stratification. We layer all these different rules or these different pieces of data. You have a walkout basement in your house. You don't have a basement at all. You're on a slab. I can look at the sales of properties and see that ones on a slab are selling for 10% less than ones that have a walkout basement. And somewhere in the middle are the people that have a normal basement. It's neither walkout and it's not a slab. We adjust for that kind of stuff. So this is mass appraisal of real estate, but there's a lot of research and valuation studies that go into this to try to make it more accurate. If the market is going up, it does set the market. But there's a particular area, not in this part of the county, where there were vacant lots selling for exorbitant amounts of money. Not going to name it. You can figure it out if you also know that there's an attorney general investigation into those prices. What did I decide to do about that? I threw all those sales away. As far as I know, they were informed, came in from wherever, bought the property. But if somebody paid $30,000 for something that they could have had for 10, what's the market? Now, the pattern of the sales, I got to look at the pattern, but in this case, I had two patterns, and there was nothing physically different about these vacant lots. So I decided to ignore the more expensive sales. I don't generally do that, but in this case, I can say, go talk to the Attorney General if you don't believe me that this needed to be ignored. You had a question.
I'm on the school board here.
Okay.
So you said about the millage being lower.
Yes.
As a school board member, though, we're not able to, like the millage is set. We can only go as high as what the millage allows us to go.
But the millage, you are required, the school district, the school board is required to reset their millage in the year of a reassessment.
Yes.
It's not an option.
Whatever comes back, though, is we can choose to go anywhere from the
What-
base to the highest place.
Yeah,
as a school board
usually 2-3% is the limit that you're allowed to raise it for a school district. So a school district will have to lower its millage so it gets the exact same levy, and then they can raise it 2 or 3% with a second vote too. They got to do 2 votes also. So it becomes real obvious if a county, a municipality, or a school district is raising taxes in the year of a reassessment, because they have to do 2 votes. So all the media, everybody's going to know that, and maybe they do, but it's capped, because before that law was written in, imagine the values went up 6 times, and no offense to any particular school district, I'm a school board member, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to cut the millage in half. Aren't I nice? The values went up 6 times, I'm going to cut the millage in half. I just tripled my money. And that used to happen until the law was changed to say, got to be revenue neutral.
I just wanted to make sure that it's like we can only go to where it's set.
Yes,
Like,
schools have a cap every single year, and the reassessment doesn't make that better for them. and it doesn't make it any worse. The one good news about, I mentioned this earlier, but I want to restate it. Schools need money to operate. The only way they could fix inequities was spot appeals. They won't need to do that anymore because all the values are going to be up where they're supposed to be. So there won't be any of the welcome stranger, oh, you just bought your house, I'm going to file an appeal against it. Other questions? Okay.
68 municipalities. What's important is the one you live in, what you're telling me. And the parcels, like you had this on your December news site. How do I find the parcel, what parcel I'm in for my municipality?
Okay, he's got a copy. Every month we do a report for the commissioners, and every quarter the judge looks at it. It's on the county website, status reports, and he's showing some samples of the neighborhood maps that show this area is purple and this area is green because they're different neighborhoods. If you go to the county's website and click on Map Viewer, you can search by name or parcel number and find your parcel. And the first two digits of the district will tell you what municipality you're in. If you're 68, that means Pottsville. All the municipalities have a number. It will not show you what neighborhood you're in.
That's what I want to know.
No, it'll show you what township you're in on the county's current website. It will not show you what neighborhood you're in. When this is over, further along in the process, we might be able to produce some PDFs or additional documents that people can reference, so you know what other properties are being compared with. But
Why ain't that being
because
released?
okay, why isn't that being released?
I
Because
wouldn't be wasting my time in like a
well,
neighborhood there where the properties are overvalued, or higher.
well, here's the challenge, and he's asking, how do you evaluate your property if you don't know your neighborhood? Ultimately, you're going to evaluate it based on the number we put on it, what we think it's worth. This is another one of those harsh realities of assessment law. I'm happy to explain how the values are arrived at. I've touched on examples tonight of what affects the value. The walkout basements is an example. But the calculations cannot be appealed, only the final answer. So if you want to challenge your value at a formal appeal, you can't come in and say, well, I don't like Tim's formula. There's a court case that says you can't appeal how I arrived at the value. Now, it's not a secret, but it's not finished yet either. It's not finished until July when we put the final notices in the mail. And even then, it's not finished until November when the chief assessor certifies the tax roll. So it's in a state of flux. We might change the neighborhood boundaries during the informal reviews. If we discover that there's a brand new zoning that took effect and we've got some sales to support it, we might draw a line and make a new color. It's not done. But the more important thing I want you to hear from me is, and again, I like to give you the straight truth. You can't appeal based upon what neighborhood you're in. It might be helpful for you to find your own comps to know what neighborhood you're in. So I can see an advantage to that. But ultimately, whether you're getting help from a realtor or an appraiser, folks that deal with this industry are going to know a lot about the neighborhoods and the areas of what affects things. Yeah. Sure. You were spot assessed? Okay. Spot appealed, to be precise.
So if you decide to appeal, get an appraisal. It's the only thing that will be in your favor to be able to counteract it. You have to get an appraisal. That's what they'll use. Go hire somebody to do it for you, because that's really the proof, is to get your property appraised. We bought a property. It was an old farmhouse, 1880s, right before the 2008. And so we paid at least $30,000 more than what the house was worth because there was nothing available and on the market. So that flipped the switch for us to be assessed. And basically we had to go get, even though we had just bought it from the bank and there was an appraisal from the bank, we had to go get a separate appraisal to be able to prove that the house was not worth what we paid for it. So I would encourage you to get an appraisal if you really feel like it's not the value, is to have a private appraisal done for your property.
Thank you. And I don't disagree with you, but I'm going to add to it because there's one thing different about when you appealed it and today. You were appealing your property in an annual appeal. There are 92,000 properties. If 10% of them file appeals, that's 9,200 fee appraisals. There are not enough appraisers in a 4-county radius to do that many fee appraisals. And we know that, and the appraisers know that. The best evidence of value at an appeal is a fee appraisal done for that appeal. If we can get the data right with the informal reviews, the data mailers, and all of those things, then it's less likely that people would need an appeal because we've already unlocked the values. Everything's in flux. So you're not going to find the opposition to value at an appeal that you would in an annual appeal. I said earlier, we're not going to give it away just because we like you. The board's not going to reduce it. But if you can't get an appraisal and you have an appraisal that was done for bank financing or another purpose, I'm not an attorney, but I'm a 40-year-old, or I've been doing this for 40 years. I'm not 40 years old, I'm a lot older than that. Bring what you got. The boards can look at it. They're not going to put as much weight on it as a fee appraisal done for this purpose. But there might be really helpful information in that bank appraisal. So if it's commercial, it might have information on expenses and cap rates that's of interest. If it's a residential, it might talk about things that the appraiser that went through the home in a lot more detail than we did that the board can read and look at. So the number on the appraisal is less valuable as you progress from a fee appraisal for purpose to any fee appraisal you've got, to an older fee appraisal, to a comparative market analysis that a local realtor agreed to do for you because you were going to consider selling the property. I like to tell people, and although it isn't officially amended in the county's rules, but my recommendation to the county has been create some asterisk rules, reassessment only rules, that loosen the restrictions a bit on what you can bring. Not that it's going to hold the same weight. So you're not wrong. But logistically, it's not possible for everybody to do that. And yep. Any more questions? Over here.
Our property right now it's commercial residential. And we were looking to get rid of it because of the environmental issues we live around. And we had talked to different realtors and they said that the housing market is up right now, but being where we live, we would not even get near what we would get if our house was somewhere else. So how did you even take that into consideration, like with the environment, like what we're surrounded by with this assessment?
The short answer is through the neighborhood process, we're going to get a lot of that. If you don't have what I call a pocket neighborhood, housing development, mobile home park, blighted area, those are pocket neighborhoods. It's really easy to draw a boundary around them. What's left when you take all the pocket neighborhoods out looks like a piece of Swiss cheese. Sometimes we call it the residual. So if you're in a township and the influence of all of the premium things have been taken away, so they're not raising your rate, and the really bad stuff down around the corner. My wife was looking at a house the other day on Zillow. She's like, check this one out. This is really cool. We brought it up on Google Maps. There's a 6 building confined chicken operation right next to it. Does that affect the value of that property to be right next? I mean, I love chicken and I love chicken farmers, but I don't want to live right next to a chicken barn, especially 6 of them. Those kind of things might be unique to the property. We might not know about until you tell us at an informal. But as far as the regional things, the area, the first thing to know is we take the influence of the expensive stuff away, study it separately, so we're not raising the value on the people who live outside of the development. And again, if there's blighted or a dump or I know the bio thing is an issue, those things can affect areas, but if you're far enough away from them, then you're in the residual. And that's how we try to identify that.
House dam falling in beside right next to my property.
Do you own the condemned house that's
No.
falling down? It's next door? Okay, that's what we would call an off-property limiting factor. Take a picture of it, like from your front porch, and bring it to an informal review or send it in on a DVM. If a buyer would be affected by it, then I want to adjust for it if I can. Warren County. Anybody know where Warren County is? Oil country. I had a guy come in at an informal review. He plopped a mason jar down on the table with gusto. Book. Half water, half oil. That's my well water. Did I believe him in Warren County that that's what? Of course I did. It didn't surprise me. I had another guy brought in a box of snake skins, and he had taken pictures of the snakes hanging over his portico, the porch. It's infested. I've had people out. I've done all this stuff. I can't get these snakes out of my house. What did we do? We listed it as an adjustment because a buyer's certainly going to be affected if they can't go through the front door without having to part the snakes that were hanging on the thing. True stories. I'm not making it up. If it affects the value of the property, if a buyer might be influenced, give us a chance to see if we, can make an adjustment for it. I have no incentive to make your value any higher than what it might sell for. In fact, you might have sold, and I'm trying to figure out why it sold for less than the others in the area. And the reason is because I never stood on the front porch looking at the house across the way. And the data collectors are just data collectors, so they're not doing it either. And all those the hundreds and thousands of pictures that we took are looking at the house, not from the house. So give us a chance to learn about the property. You know it better than we do. I'll do you again, and then we'll come back.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, we live 1.6 miles from a sewage plant, sewage sludge, where they make it into called biosolids. I still call it sewage sludge, but that literally stinks sometimes that bad. We're impacted badly right now. I wouldn't even want to try to sell my property to someone else to put them in the same predicament. That just isn't me, but that comes in our house. So how do you sell a place? How can you sell a property when you have that going on? It comes right in your house. It wakes you right out of your sleep.
Whatever.
I can show you.
I'm not even going to attempt to guess how you remediate or deal with those circumstances, even the chicken farm example or any of that. From an assessor point of view, what we need to do is try to predict what the probable typical selling price is. It's not worth nothing. I will have people come in and tell me my property is worth nothing. Well, fine, give it to me. No, I can't really say that. I'm kidding. Those of you at home, Tim Barr says, give me your properties. No, it's not worth nothing. If it affects the sale, we want to lower the value, and the millages will just be a little bit higher to compensate for that when the whole thing's over. I want the right number on it, but it's not zero. Ultimately, there is a price where the demand and the supply intersect. Anybody remember that in school? There is a point at which it will intersect. And fortunately, I don't have to find it. I just have to look at what other people did. Back in the back. Yep.
What I understand you as you're saying is, okay, so say we pay a very high price for our home because values of the homes are up. Okay, 5 years from now, when the values of the home come down where they were, okay, what do we do?
Great question. Okay.
What do we do?
Did you all hear her question? So you've got a situation where the market's up right now. Reassessment locks in base year values, hopefully not for another 30 years. The millages come down. But remember my slide at the beginning with the little dollar signs? It's not just the whole county that might go up or down. Some areas might go up or down differently. Some areas might continue to go up while others can go down. There are only two things that can be done. Neither of them by the assessment office. They're not allowed to change it. They can't say, oh, this area is dreadful. You know, there's a new warehouse went in and everybody doesn't want to live there anymore. You don't have any warehouses being built in the county, right?
Oh, yes.
Um, they cannot adjust for changes. That's spot assessing. You could appeal, but you would have to show the present day value then in the year of the appeal. Oh, it's lower. And then the court would apply, not the court, the appeal board would apply the latest and greatest common level ratio to try to adjust for it. But common level ratio is a county-wide statistic, so it's not terribly accurate to everybody's individual circumstance. The only true fix is to, and as painful as it is for the county, and they don't have to have me do the next one, is to do regular updates. Every 3 to 6 years, you adjust for those things. And if you're in an area that didn't change, values go down, say the values go down 20%. Millages would equalize, they'd be 20% higher, but you'd pay the same. But if you're in an area where values went down 40% and the average was at 20%, then the taxes go down. And if you're in an area that the values kept going up, the millages, you're not going to be happy because you're going to pay more. The only way to fix that for real is to do what every other state in the country does, but Pennsylvania. We are the only state that doesn't have a rule mandating regular reassessments. We're the last one left that doesn't mandate this. So again, it's not because I want to be in business to do assessments. I'll retire eventually. It's because I want the assessments to be fair. And that's the only way you can fix those kind of things long term. You've been a great group tonight. Thank you for coming out. Again, I want to thank the school district for making the facility available. If you didn't get enough of this, there's 3 more this week. You can come see us in Tamaqua tomorrow night, Pottsville on Thursday, and on Wednesday, and Blue Mountain on Thursday. Same presentation, same information, but you're welcome to attend another one if you like. If you have additional questions, you're welcome to come up and see me afterwards while I pack up and make sure we're not in here for make the school people stay late. Thank you.